Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be going over post assemblies. This is also episode number 26 if you're going through our implementation process. So, jumping right in, a couple things I'm going to go through, focusing on wood framing first, and then we're also going to look at some red iron steel frame examples. But first, there's also some things that you have to know what are post assemblies, and we'll start with that, kind of running down the list here. There's three main things to know about post assemblies. And I'll start with number one. One thing, post assemblies only affect post frame buildings. So just like the name implies, post frame. If you're using stud frame, this does not affect your framing at all. So number two would be, there's three parts shown in the model. There's a lot more parts to post assemblies. So when you get in there and you start setting them up, there are up to 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 parts that you can set. So we got upper post, all these. So again, only three of those are shown in the model. In this example model that I designed here, I'll point a few of those out. So we have a lower post here looking something like a permacolumn product. We have our standard, our primary product, which is the center section of the post. And then you can also have an upper post like I've done here in the gables. I've added a framed on section, maybe a field framed piece that gets added to the post if you're doing something like this. So again, those are the only three that are shown in the model. So if you're looking to see the boats and things like that, we're not showing some of the hardware items. Not important at this time, but it would be on the material list. So again, that's number two. And number three is just you really have to understand that if you're going to use post assemblies, you have to make a decision. And again, you're not forced to use them. If you understand, well, what are the biggest benefits of post assemblies? Looking at foundation, and one challenge that's came up over the years is, there's a lot of settings in the foundation area, and it lets you do a lot of different things, a lot of different configurations from post toe to stem wall, thick edge slab, along with all those different combinations you may have. Well, the challenge has been when you get into setting up things like span tables, which we're going to talk about at the end, is we're trying to automate the material that we're selecting. So if you're a salesperson and you choose the post material in here, that works well. But what happens, when the post material changes, you may need to be also changing the footing size. So we're trying to automate all that. Another case was with the permacolumn. Before we didn't show it in the model, but when you would change the post size, the permacolumn size also has to change. Maybe the footing below ground, the base needs to change, the footing pad, whatever you're using. Again, we're just tying all that together, making it all work. And then, like I said, we'll explain how to incorporate that into span tables at the end. But my number three highlight is just you have to understand that if you're going to do post assemblies, you have to kind of make a decision and use them. I would say for most of the time or all the time, anytime you're using posts, they're going to be assemblies. Because as soon as you activate a post assembly and you start using it, it ignores what your foundation settings here say. So besides the post toe type, or I guess all of them, it ignores what these settings are doing as long as a post assembly is being selected as the post material. So, what would that cause? I'm trying to think, the different instances where that's going to affect and cause issues in your process, and that may be on your quote page. If you're doing a quote page that lists out the foundation, and you're using our tokens, again, that's another whole lesson to get into. But when you're using our tokens, you may be using our fastener and base and uplift and listing these items out on your quote page to detail out, what kind of wall framing they're getting. Well, as soon as you use post assemblies, now that can all be described within the name of the column. So it's all working together. It's all in the name. So you kind of need to abbreviate a bit just so that you can see the full description. But now this replaces all of those settings all at once, and then it all works together. So again, we're going to jump right in. First, I'm going to focus on setting up a permacolumn type material where we have a concrete bottom and a standard wood frame post. And I set some of these up beforehand just so we have an example to look at and get started. But we're going to be going through from start. I'll start with a blank slate and we'll set them up and go through. So let's start with the permacolumn. Again, I'm going to use a laminated column as the upper section. This could be a solid, so it could be whatever. But here's the first example that we're going to look at. And you can see I have several items set up. So again, going start to finish, we're going to go through each step and set that up. So I'm starting with our template database just so that it's all generic materials. If you're starting in your setup today, this is what your database would look like. But first thing that you have to know, again, if you were quoting with permacolumns before, we have maybe instructed you to set up your permacolumn products in our foundation tab. So again, you have to move the foundation items to framing that you want to be showing in the 3D model. So I'll show you how to do that. It's not too hard, but I'll walk you through that. So if your items are in here, you would have to select them and delete them out of the foundation section and go into framing. And in this case, I don't have them added yet, but I'm going to just click the plus sign. You could also do this in Excel Upload if you've used Excel. But let's just add a 3-ply permacolumn. We'll set the part length to 5 feet, set the price and cost and weight if you want to set those, and we'll save. So in this case, we've added this framing item, and now that makes it available to be set up in our post assemblies. So I'm going to go ahead and save. So starting with post assemblies, again, when you get into this section, it's in the setup wizard, go to post assemblies, and I'm going to click the plus sign here and just set a name. And again, we're going to start with a 3-ply 2x6 permacolumn. And let's also add the description of the other items that we're going to be including in that assembly. In this case, I'll do a footing pad and an uplift, just standard bracket. So we've got a primary material. I will select my standard post, so 3-ply nail in post. It's going to be going in a post-hole foundation type, and we need to set the foundation width and depth. Again, this is going to override the foundation settings in the job. So if I set my foundation width to 16 inch, and we can do the depth, maybe it will be a 4-foot hole, and this is optional. It's whatever you do in your area. And you may have different depths too. So if you want to have different depths, you would need to include the description of the depth. Maybe according to code, you do different depths for your post holes. So again, this is pretty straightforward. We've got our usages. They came over from our primary material, so it's already set. You may want to double check those and set those accordingly. And then now down to the bottom, there's the entries section. So when I click add new, it asks me, well, what do I want to start with? And you could start at the top, you could start at the bottom. I'm going to just start with, since we don't have a top of post, or I'm not going to be setting that up, or upper post. We'll talk about that a little bit later in upper domain. I'm going to drop one down. We're going to all the way to lower post. We're going to start there. So with the lower post, what category do we want that to go to? I'm going to set this to go into framing. So it's going into my framing category. And again, you may have different categories that you have set up. But we'll go with framing, and I'm going to select my material. Since I've added it to framing, I should have my permacolumn. There it is. And what is the length of it? So we're going to set that to 5 feet. And how many? In this case, just 1 per. So we do that. You could also set up special conditions. Maybe it's related to job questions. Maybe you're doing a project type, commercial, and you do a certain thing or whatever. Again, you could even set up special conditions here. We're not going to for this example. I'm going to save this entry. So now we have our lower post. That's the first part, and that's what we're seeing in this 3D model. We're seeing this lower post here. It's 5 feet. If you tilt it up, you can see the 5-foot section. So notice there's a little gap at the bottom of our blue cylinder. That's the next thing we're going to set up. It's not shown in the model here. It does show up on the cross sections, but it is important to set that up in the right way, and I'll explain how to do that here. So we add new, and I'm going to select post base. When you select post base, it actually lets you, as soon as you select the material, again, your footing pads, whatever you're using, it may be in foundation, maybe, I don't know which category you have it in. I'm going to use this 16-inch composite footing pad, and it asks me what the length is. So that's just saying the height or the thickness of that pad. Let's say it's 3 inches, 4 inches. I'm just going to set it to 4. And then how many? Again, 1 per. So we do this, we click save. I'm not going to do any special conditions. Click save. So now we have our footing pad, and we've got our permacolumn. Maybe you're doing some kind of uplift bracket or whatever that may be, a custom situation. Again, you can add as many of these as you want. When you click add new and you select, what is the type, select uplift. Maybe you have some uplift bolts that you put through your post. Again, it may be in foundation, maybe in hardware, wherever. You find the item, select it. Just see if I have an uplift bracket in here. Yeah, so here's a boat kit for an uplift anchor. I've got a couple of different ones, and I'll just use that one. So again, 1 per part, and save. And again, you can add as many as you need if you have separate part numbers that you need to include, you can do that. In this case, we've got 3 entries. You can have more than that if you need. So if I click save, we've got our first post assembly created. And I'm going to move right on in and let's look at, so we've done the first one and we're going to test this out in the job, but let's look at our back wall here. So we're doing something a little bit different. In order to do this, I went into advanced edit and I selected this back wall and I adjusted the wall steel up. And then I also selected the post assembly, which set all the foundation settings automatically. So that's how I got to that point. But we're going to go ahead and set up that example. And the reason I want to do this example is, again, it's a lot different. It is a stem wall type situation, but it also includes an upper post. So while we don't see anything happening on the bottom other than concrete, we do get another section of wood that shows up in our job review in here. So when we go into framing, we can have our upper post listed in there. So again, let's jump in and set that up. In the setup wizard, again, same place, click the plus sign and select our primary material. In this case, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do another 3-ply lamppost. And it's not post-toe, we're going to do stem wall. And again, foundation width, foundation height. So this can be a little bit confusing. If you think of a foundation width and height, what does that mean? Along with the depth. So the width, we're just going to stick with 8 inches as in the thickness of the wall. And the foundation height is the total height of that wall. So if we say that it's 6 foot tall or 4 foot tall, that means the total wall is 4 feet. So how far does it go in the ground? If it goes in the ground 2 feet, that means it comes back up out of the ground 2 feet. Or if it goes in the ground 4 feet, it would come back out of the ground 2 feet. So this is be right at grade. If this is only in the ground 2 feet, it would be out of the ground 2 feet. So you get the idea. This foundation depth is how far you're going into the grade. And then this is the total height of it. Footing width and depth. So I'm going to set this to 2 foot wide and 1 foot deep. So we have a spread footing at the bottom. And we'll look at a cross section when we get done of this so that you can see the difference and to see what that all looks like. So we'll go ahead and save this. And you can see it gets added here. Now, anytime you save, you can kind of come back and you can edit so you don't have to finish it out. You can always reopen it and continue on. So with that, let's add a description. So we just call that on stem wall with upper post. Again, you could be as descriptive as you want. It's up to you and your setup. So we go to add new. In this case, I'm not going to select top of post. That could be a hardware item, something that you're fastening to your truss. Again, we're not going to use it. It's not shown in the model. You could use it. I'm going to jump to upper post and select framing. That's where I want this piece to go. And in this case, think of, some companies would field frame a section. Maybe the posts are all same long or close to the same length, and then they field frame all that. So in this case, you could do that now. If we go to upper post, we select the framing part. Again, you would need a framing part that you're going to use. If you're using 3-ply of 2x6, you would have to add a 3-ply of 2x6 in here as a part number to do that. So I don't have to set any usages, but I do want to add a few different part lengths so that I have different lengths to go on a gable wall. So going back into post assemblies, now I can continue on and I can add that upper section. If we go to upper post, we select our material and we should see field frame post extension and again the length. So this length here is just asking what is the length from the top of the post today, like how far are we coming down. So when you look at this, in this case I just went 6 inches down. You could set it just to a very small amount, but again the farther the length that you put in there, the farther down this eave wall it's going to come. So if you're just splicing there, you may only put an inch or two in there just so you make sure you get enough. I set mine at 6 inches. So in this case, I could set this length at 6 inches. How many? Again, 1 per. Maybe you want to do 3. If you do 2x6s, if you'd select a 2x6, you could do 3 per part, and it would do the same thing. So if you don't want to create a new item, we could do I could select a 2x6 item here, and I could set this to be 3, and it would do the same thing. It would add 3 of those 2x6s to extend out. So that's a very nice feature if you keep your post all the same length. Again, this one we'll save all. We'll go back to the next step. So we have upper post. Moving on, we want to add a bracket kit for the bottom section. So in this case, you may be using a sturdy wall bracket on the bottom, and we have our upper post at the top. So in this case, it may be a post base. It could just be a hardware item. It's not going to be shown in the model. As you can see, it does get added to the material list. So we have an upper section. We're using 2x6s. We have our sturdy wall bracket. And again, this is, if you think back to the way Smartbuild works now, before this 1.98 release, you would have had to go change the bracket or have a complicated package that's bringing in the correct bracket. Now, when you select this assembly, it's going to bring in the right bracket, maybe even a boat kit, whatever else you want to add here. So again, that sums up that one. And let's move on. Let's look at one other example that I have in this job. And maybe it's not really a permacolumn. Maybe you're just doing a post sleeve, something like that. In this case, I'm using a cedar post for my porch post here. If you think maybe you're doing like a grade guard, the grade guards, one thing I want to point out, like if we wanted to set up a grade guard, again, I could select my item, select my primary material. And again, maybe you want to do foundation items. We could skip over that, but let's say that we want to add a grade guard product or a post sleeve around that post. So when you do that, since the post has to be full length, we don't show it in the model. The post would need to go all the way down to the bottom of the footing. So the only way that we show it in the model is if you actually replace it with a different item, like we do with the permacolumn. So again, not too big of a deal, not going to be shown in the model, but it could be easily set up. In this case, to set it up, I could simply go to my bottom section. Maybe it's just considered an uplift. You could call it an uplift and find that item. Maybe you have it in foundation. I'm just going to pick this one, apply, and one per part. And again, maybe you want to find one that fits the size, but you get the idea. So we have the grade guard, we have the part, and we click save. In this case, it would not show this item. It's an uplift. It's not shown in the model, and the post length is not being affected, but you can have the correct size grade guard coming in with your product. So if you go back to the current way Smartbuild was working, you would have had to select a different grade guard and automate all that in all these settings. Now, if you use post assemblies, it's going to automate those sizes for you. So we've went through 3 different examples of post assemblies, setting up wood framing, looking at your stem wall, your permacolumn, maybe doing sleeves, things like that. What I want to cover next is for our steel frame customers. We want to look at, well, how can this benefit other companies, maybe not using wood frame. So if we look at a project like this where we're using an I-beam type frame, the thing with it is maybe you're not adding all these different things to it, but you do need to automatically size the foundation, the footing, and that's how this can be nice, along with other brackets that may come with it. In this case, when I go to my details and my wall framing and I select my beam size, or again, as we're going to talk about span tables at the end, maybe we're going to automate the post size with a span table. In this case, I'm just selecting it manually from the job, but as soon as I select my post size, it automatically sets my concrete foundation, footing, sets all these automatically and ignores my settings that I have here. So back to my point of you really need to choose one or the other because it can be very confusing. What settings are taking effect. You would just start to ignore these foundation settings anytime that you're using post material because that's how the system works. So when I set my post material here, I have an 8-inch thick wall, 24 inches tall, and it also sets my stem wall. And if you run a cross section on it, you can kind of see what it's doing here. Another note that when you're looking at your cross sections, it actually shows you the details of what's in that post assembly. So the post assembly, it's showing I have a post base, I'm using an anchor kit, and then it shows me the footing width and depth. So it's not showing me the other foundation notes anymore. So if I would go into this job, no matter what I set my foundation notes to, these here are ignored and they're coming in from this assembly. So if I go back, we'll go into the setup wizard and we'll see how this is set up. So for an all metal example that I have here, the one that I set up, we'll take a look at it really quickly. We just set our name. What do you want it to be? Describe the wall size. Maybe you add some more detail here. You select your primary material. Again, select my foundation type, footing width, height, depth, and all this. And then where it's used. And then down at the bottom, the only thing I'm adding is my anchor kit for the column. And just add new. I have it set to post base. And then my result in a job looks something like this. If I go back to the model, you can see it would look like this. So again, that's a really quick example of the red iron. But the last part that I want to cover before we close the video is span tables and how that works. So if you think of your wall framing today, you're selecting a post material, and maybe yours is being driven by the span tables, or maybe you've even taken a step further and you're driving it by your zip code, which we have a new feature to do that, loading tables, which would control your loading here. So your zip code drives the loading span tables. So in order to set that up, I'm going to jump over into span tables. In here, I'm going to start with a sample span table that I've got set up. And when I look at my span table here, I'm just using a nail lamb column, 12-foot wall height up to 8-foot post spacing. My building depth is 80. I use this column. And again, yours may be totally different, but the idea is span tables select the column size as the building size changes. Now, if you think, well, I also need to change the footing, change whatever's coming with it, the post base, all that, maybe you're using permacolumns. Again, this is where now your span tables can also, instead of just controlling the post material, you can have them control these foundation settings automatically. So if you think of what's happening in this area here, and now imagine that when I set this up, if I set up post assemblies, it would control the foundation settings also. Again, another reason why you have to make a decision, are you going to use post assemblies or not? It's not a setting or a feature that you have to use, but if you do use it, your system's going to be a lot more powerful and automated, but it's not something that you have to use. So before we jump in and actually set up our first table, you may have noticed this new button up here at the top right that says Update Questions. And when you click into it, it just says, hey, it's going to affect all your span tables. And you may wonder what that is, but before we can really set these up, you may have to set up some questions in your framing rules in the job tab. So let's think through this. When you set up a span table, your first line of that span table may be that you want to choose a standard post assembly, as in a post hole, post in the ground. And then the same size column you may want to choose for line 2 may be a permacolumn, but the other values stay the same. And then the third option may be on a stem wall or with a bracket. And without these questions, previously there was no way to be able to properly set up post assemblies. And this is kind of the missing piece that we see that's going to help all that. So if we just pause for just a second and go into settings and framing rules, we'll go into there. And again, I'm just going to edit my framing rules here and kind of show you what I would do in ways that you can set that up. But when you go into the job tab, notice I have this job question that says project type. And it's nothing too specific, but if you look at what's in there, I've got 3 options that you could choose from: residential, agriculture, and commercial. And again, to edit these, if you already have them, you can click the green E and you can edit them. I'm just doing a list type and I have a prompt here. And then I also have list options. So they're divided by a line break there. So you can kind of see how those get set up. Again, pretty straightforward, but if you wanted to set up a new one, simply click add. I would click list and then put your prompt in. And for this one, let's just do foundation style. Again, this could be whatever you want. It's just thinking of a way that you can control what type of foundation is going to be in the building, which helps it select the correct line from the assembly. And this may be post hoe, just keeping these very generic. So post hoe, maybe post hoe with permacolumn, and then line break, and we'll do one more just to be thorough here. So maybe stem wall with bracket. And again, these could be whatever you want, just so you know what they are, and you divide them by line breaks and you save that. So now this one shows up at the bottom. If you select it, you can click on it, and when you do, you can move it all the way to the top or move it up and down. I like to keep this one at the top, maybe right below project type. So now I have this new foundation style, and these are in my job questions, things that I answer right as I'm taking the customer's info. So one of the first things that I answer. So I'm going to click save here, and then we'll move back over into the span tables and we'll finish out what we were doing there. So again, here's our ePost standard that we started with. And again, thinking about, we added those new questions. We really haven't done anything here. And how do they play into that? So again, back to my point of how do you choose between from permacolumn to standard post to whatever options you offer? if you have a span table that's only choosing one style. And that's where we add these questions in. So as we get into this, it'll start to make more sense. Again, question 1, I'm just going to set it to project type. In question 2, we're going to set it to foundation style. And again, you can do up to 4 if you want. I'm going to click update. And when that does, it adds new columns into my span table. So you see it really starts to add some complexity to the span table. And now if we could proceed through and we add this wall height, so let's just start filling this out. So let's say the wall height is 12 feet tall and our post spacing is 8 and the building depth is maybe 40 feet wide. Okay, that's all pretty straightforward. So now we also have to answer some new questions. So if the project is an agricultural project, again, I'm just making this up as I go, but you'll get the point. And the foundation style is post hole, I want it to pick my first post hole assembly that I have. And again, providing that you have a laminated column, setup, assembly, click add. Now that's line 1. And again, we're going to be adding some more tools to make this setup easier. You can work in Excel once you get the formatting down. But if we just click to add another line, again, this is going to stay the same. So I'm going to have 12 feet, 8-foot post spacing, 40-foot building depth. And I'm going to go down, I'm going to skip those questions, going to go down and pick the exact same size column, but with the permacolumn instead. Now here we could also, I'll go ahead and just pick agricultural and we're going to pick permacolumn here. So now you start to see the pattern. So everything's the same except these two questions here are different. The project type's the same, the questions answers are different, and then I have two different things here. So again, as your building size changes, you may have more lines, but it's basically this primary material. Think of it as your primary material is usually going to be the first option, maybe by itself in an assembly, and then your secondary and third choices, but they're going to be powered by this post hole question. So again, I'm just going to stop right at this point. We're not going to get more complex, and I'll save this, and we'll actually go into a job and see how this looks. So again, I've opened up a job here. Couple things to note, always when you're using span tables, your loading is a factor. And if you've gotten into loading tables, that could mean your zip code is a factor. So we're not using zip code just here yet. We're just talking about loading. And again, when you pick your loading and then you go into your wall framing and you look at what your wall framing is. So in this case, you have to be using auto if you're expecting it to use your table. So whenever I select auto and I would pick my standard loading that I set up, the job question, again, back here in this project type, if I select agricultural and I say my foundation is post hole, then it would pick that assembly, providing everything else is dialed in. So again, even though I'm doing the same loading, all that I would do is change to permacolumn, and it would be smart enough to switch that and pick a different line from that span table. So again, you start to see the complexity here. And again, you can go very in depth into this and set up all your different footing styles. You can have several job questions, but the more complex you get, obviously it's going to be a little bit more setup, maybe a little bit more to maintain, probably not so much maintenance, because once it's set up, you really don't have to mess with it that much. But again, if we go back to the home page, and I'm going to go back into span tables just to clarify that one more time. So when you're in the span tables, this new update questions button is going to be a big part of how your span tables work. So again, you want to set up your questions. You may have to go into the framing rules to dial those in and figure out, what does your process, what are your building style, what do you need those questions to be? And then as you set those up, you come back and add them to your span tables. And keep in mind, in these other span tables that I have, like this end rafter or some of these others that I have set up, you don't have to use these new job questions. They get added to every table. So if you download the tables and you look at them, as long as that column is empty in that line, it just ignores those questions. So I'll give you a quick preview. You can see it's question 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a lot of these are empty. But when you go down, if we would go down, we would find the standard loading that we added. We would have the question answer there. So again, that's kind of getting a little bit further into span tables. We have some other videos on span tables. The point of this video, post assemblies, ties into those quite a bit, because it could be that you use post assemblies as a standalone feature. One other wrinkle that you can use and we really haven't gotten into it that much. It may be something you discover on your own, and that is, okay, let's say that we just ignore the span tables, we ignore all the framing rules, and we're just going to use post assemblies as a standalone item. We're going to go to wall framing, and we're going to pick the post assembly based off of what we want to use, which that works just fine. You can do that. If you do that, and earlier in the video, I mentioned that once you activate these post materials as an assembly, it ignores these job questions. It does, but it doesn't. So there's one wrinkle to that, and I want to explain that before we end the video here. But the fastener, the base, and uplift, these are actually settings answers that they are being ignored. But you can consider one thing: there is still some power into these settings if you think about it. So jumping over into one of these post assemblies and thinking this through a little bit, again, even though those foundation settings do not get honored, now this new assembly is taking over, you can build in variables. So let's say that you want to do two different size footing pads based off of the user's choice. So I could have this first 12-inch composite footing pad get added if, and I could set up a special condition and say if, and if you just look for base here, if the foundation base equals, and again, the answer in the job would have to equal this product, and then it would use that. If this is not true, it would not include this item in the post assembly. And then if we save this and just take this exact thing and copy it, now we have a new footing pad, and let's do a different size here. So I'm going to pick we'll do a 20-inch just to be different. And we can say if the foundation base equals 20-inch footing pad and save that. And I've moved this up here. So now you can see the formulas. So again, back to my point of, even though those settings don't really do anything directly, you can indirectly affect this post assembly that's getting placed into the job with these if statements. So again, our team can help. I know this gets very complex. And again, like our point made several times throughout this call, that if you don't feel like post assemblies are something that you want to set up in your account, we totally understand. Smartbuild will work just fine without it, but it is there as an option. So hope this video helps everyone, and God bless.